Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of my Operation Epic playlist on YouTube. As I will keep repeating in every video, this is primarily aimed toward Catholic teenagers, though anyone is welcome to watch them. And I hinted early on that I'm going to try to strive toward popular culture and how I might be able to relate that to our Catholic faith. And I figured I'd start that particular series with my absolute favorite book ever, besides possibly the Bible, and that would be Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows. Now, I know there's a lot of controversy within the Catholic community of like, oh, well, Harry's a wizard, and, he's practicing magic, so should Catholics really be reading this book? Well, for starters, J.K. Rowling herself admitted that she's Anglican and that her faith influenced a lot of aspects of this book, and quite honestly, this video would be way too long if I tried to discuss all of them. So I'm just going to point out a couple of really cool highlights within the book of where the Christian message, and sometimes even the Catholic message, is really played strong here. And how it's not a perfect allegory. It's not supposed to be like everything represents something, but rather it's sort of kind of like in my video of the veneration of saints. It's sort of a role model of how we can get closer to Christ. So first off, if you're wondering like, okay, Paul, it might be a bit of a stretch to say that this is a Christian book. Well, unfortunately, when you get to the chapter Godric's Hollow, I'll see if I can flip to it while I'm talking. But in the chapter Godric's Hollow, you'll find that Harry and Hermione are looking at a lot of graves. Oh, spoiler alert. There's no way I can talk about this without spoiling stuff, so if you haven't watched it, you might want to stop right now. When Harry and Hermione are going to Godric's Hollow to see Harry's parents' graves, they happen to see a couple of tombstones, not necessarily of Harry's parents, and if you can see this properly, it's upside down in my video feed, but in italics it says, "Where your treasure is, there will your heart be also," and that is taken directly from the Gospel of Matthew. And it kind of puts into perspective, how Voldemort has all of his Horcruxes, and he basically considers them like his treasures, his safeguards. His soul is literally poured into them. And so we need to take that into consideration with our material goods. Like, are we pouring our soul into these material goods, or are we using them for the glory of God and not just for, like, our own self-preservation like Voldemort did? And so second, since I'm already at the chapter, there's yet another Bible verse in here. This one should be a lot easier to see. So when Harry finally, should be right around here, Harry and Hermione finally do find James and Lily's grave. And the Bible verse there is, "The last enemy that shall be destroyed is death." That, in case you aren't as Bible savvy as I am, that is from the book of 1 Corinthians. And it talks about how at the end of time, Jesus will throw the devil into the lake of fire. Death will be destroyed. The righteous will head up to heaven in the final judgment. The not so righteous, too bad for them. But in the context of Harry Potter, there's not really very many explicit mentions of God in the books. There's hints at it. They celebrate Christmas in every book. And the whole graveyard scene I just showed you, it took place behind a church. And some of the characters say thank God on occasions. Whether that's just an involuntary response or not, I don't know. But the point is that you've got the Death Eaters and Voldemort, where their agenda is to destroy death and live forever. But notice what they're doing with that eternal life. Voldemort is killing people so that he can live longer. Jesus was killed so that we could live longer. You could say it was basically the other way around. He essentially made sort of himself like a Horcrux for us, in a manner of speaking. In fact, that's kind of almost crudely parodied in the fact that when Harry goes into the Forbidden Forest at the end of the book, and Voldemort casts the killing curse on him, it's thanks to his mother's blood within Voldemort that saves Harry. Kind of like how in Holy Communion we have Jesus' blood within us, and that's what gives us eternal life. So essentially, we could die a bodily death, but we'll move on because of the King's Cross. See where I'm getting at there? Sort of like the book's allusion to purgatory, where Harry sort of rethinks his life and puts things into perspective. The other kind of interesting symbolism that's a little bit harder to catch in that book is the chapter The Silver Doe. And in that chapter, Harry and Hermione are camping. They're without Ron, so the book is kind of at a boring pace, because let's be honest, when the trio is separated, the books simply cannot stand. They just can't function without the three of them. And so Harry, as he's doing the night watch, he sees this beautiful silver doe that's made out of light so pure that it makes the snow look gray. And as he follows the doe, it leads him to a frozen pool of water, where he finds the sword of Gryffindor, which he's been searching for months. And the sword is the only thing, or at least the only thing that they can think of at present, that can destroy the Horcruxes. But in order for Harry to get to it, he needs to be brave and chivalrous and take off all of his layers. And so the symbolism there is, for one, Christ has been traditionally associated with a stag, among many other things, and a female version of a stag is a doe. You could say it's kind of like our relationship between the Blessed Mother and ourselves. You know, Jesus says, "Here is your mother," and Mary's role on the cross was to lead us to her son. So in essence, the doe is kind of like an image of Mary, how she led Harry to the sword. And in case you're thinking, well, Paul, how does a sword relate to Jesus? Well, the very first thing it says that Harry sees is a small silver cross. He takes a closer look at it, and there's a glint of deep red on the handle. Harry gets down on his knees to go and search for it. And because he realizes that he needs to remove all of those external things that are holding him back from Christ, he strips off most of his layers, but he forgets to take off the Horcrux. And as a result, the Horcrux tries to strangle him. It's kind of like how in the Catholic faith we believe that if we're in a state of mortal sin, we can't get to Christ without reconciliation. And so when they finally get the sword, they're able to destroy the Horcruxes, because the sword has imbued the venom of the basilisk that Harry killed in the Chamber of Secrets. Sort of like how when Christ died on the cross, he took on the sins of the world and he destroyed them. So Harry used the venom of a snake, which is traditionally associated with sin, and he used it to destroy sin, which I've made a comparison to how each Horcrux represents the 7 deadly sins, but I don't want to get into that because this video would probably be like 15 minutes if I did that, which I'm hoping not to do. So for the sake of not making this video overly long, which I've been trying to do with all of them, I'll list one more bit of Catholic symbolism within the book, and then I'll sort of leave you guys to your own devices. If you're already friends with me on Facebook, I've got notes on the subject, but the last piece of advice is sort of more of what I call the honest approach to Christianity, where, let's be honest, at some point in our lives, all of us have been angry with God. And the place where this is exemplified the most in the Harry Potter series is in the chapter The Life and Lies of Albus Dumbledore, where Harry and Hermione are, again, wandering around in the wilderness. Harry's wand was just broken. He was bitten by a snake, so he probably feels pretty darn lousy. But Hermione happens to sneak Dumbledore's autobiography out of Bathilda Bagshot's house, and as they're reading it, they find out that, Dumbledore was planning on taking over the Muggles. He was planning on rising to power, searching for the Deathly Hallows, ignoring his sick sister. And I'm not trying to say that Dumbledore is a god figure. On the contrary, I have quite the unpleasant things to say about Dumbledore if I had the time. But what's important here is Harry's reaction. Harry realizes that Dumbledore left him on a meandering journey. he basically just said, find and destroy all these Horcruxes if you're going to defeat Voldemort, but doesn't tell him where they are, doesn't even tell Harry what all of them are. And Harry is literally shouting so loud that birds in the trees are flying away. And he says, why is it, I could quote it if I wanted to, but don't want to wake anyone up, but Harry is basically shouting, why is it that Dumbledore, you've left me on this pointless, meandering journey without telling me all of the facts? Why is it that you're asking me to risk my life again and again and again, never telling me the full truth? And so I actually used this when I was on a Catholic mission trip as a young adult. For once I wasn't chaperoning. And I used that chapter as an analogy of our faith journey. How sometimes we might feel like we're hiking through a forest of uncertainty where we don't understand what it is that God has planned for us. Sometimes we're like, God, why the heck did you make me the way that I am? Why couldn't I have been like taller, shorter, skinnier, all that stuff that we want? But we have to realize that God sees the big picture in life. And it's the same thing as Dumbledore. You know, question his motives all you want. But if Dumbledore had told Harry right away, like, Harry, you gotta die if you're gonna defeat Voldemort, I don't think Harry would have had the strength to continue the Horcrux hunt. Same thing with God. If God told us, like, how we were gonna die and what our ultimate plan in life was, I doubt we'd want to follow him. That's why God gives us enough information, but not all of it. Because he knows that we as humans can only take so much. So I promised this video wouldn't go over 15 minutes. I know I cut it pretty close, so I apologize to you guys, but hopefully that's a start for trying to see how Harry Potter may be tempting for some, but for the most part it can also be a great role model for us who are strong in our faith, and how we can use Harry Potter as a great way of getting closer to Christ, just as the silver doe helped Harry get closer to the silver cross. So thank you very much for watching. And until my next video, which will probably be the last for the day, because it's like stupid early, have a wonderful day, God bless, and keep up the faith. Bye.